So now it's my privilege to give the Friday night talk. And so many times when I begin a Dhamma talk, I don't have any subject at all. I've given so many talks on so many subjects, I think I've covered most of them. But today somebody actually did a suggestion which was conveyed to me by one of our admin officers, and Ajahn Brahm, can you please talk about secular Buddhism? So I decided I'm going to start with that talk and see what happens. I prefer it when all of these talks which I give are unprepared. If you know a subject, you should be able to talk about it even though you have no preparation, no thinking behind it. You know what to do, and sometimes what happens, as you're giving a talk, you're focusing, you're silent, had a reasonably good meditation beforehand, and you can come up with some very interesting angles. Like you're exploring. It's a way of insight, not by thinking, not by repeating what you've learnt, but by seeing it clearly and sharing with people. Now, first of all, the whole idea of secular Buddhism, but what does that mean? First of all, secular, it's a word which has only really started to be used with Buddhism in the last 5 or 10 years, and there's a reason behind that. It is because once Buddhism started to become popular in Western countries, and the people started to investigate it for themselves. I'm being honest and frank. Many people found that the standards were very high. Just even your virtue, not to be able to hurt or harm another human being or yourself or any other beings for that matter. And also the fact that you are simple living, which is also part of not harming others. We know that's an obvious thing in our world. One of the wonderful ways of trying to limit sort of climate change is by living a simple life and not consuming so many things. And also, just when we do tend to live together, learning how to be kind to one another. And to be kind to one another means actually listening to one another, take what each other say, and respecting one another's different ideas and different views. And not only that, that because Buddhism has got a lot of respect from people like psychologists and even from people like people in the medical profession. I don't know how many people today I was talking about, just even today, about one of the things which I did. And the reason I'm saying it today is because it's on my list of things to be done one day. I don't worry about them, but I must do them. And that's for next year's invitation to go to the Cancer Research Society. They call it Solaris now, over in Cottesloe. I've been going there for 36 years, every year without fail. One time when I went there, and nothing was arranged, and I went to the office, and I said, hey, I'm supposed to be giving a talk here today, this afternoon. And they said, oh my goodness, yes you are. Oh, sorry, we forgot. I was down there to actually give the talk, and they'd forgotten all about it. They had their Christmas and New Year's break, and they were so apologetic. What did I do? Did I complain? Did I get angry? Did I just thump the table? You can't do this. Oops, I shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do this to me. Now instead, I laughed my head off. I thought it was really funny. I mean, also I saw the benefits in that. It meant I could get home early instead of doing the same old talk again. But I never quite stunned. They were so apologetic. I've known them for years. But one of the best times when I went to this Cancer Support Association, they eventually called themselves Solaris now, was when they did this renovation of their facility. Just down the road from them in Cottesloe, there lived the fellow who was a local MP, who also happened to be the Premier of the state government. That was not my mate Jeff Gallup, but this was Colin Barnett, yeah. And so, because it was in his local area, he used his influence on the state government, a worthwhile project, to actually build this new, renovated facility for them all. Multi-million dollars. And, of course, when it was opened, you have to have an opening ceremony. And who would you invite to the opening ceremony? Of course, the Premier. He paid for it, basically, so you've got to look, be kind to him. But the other VIP was, me. And I couldn't get my head around that. Why invite a Buddhist monk there? What about the Archbishop or the Rabbi or something? Somebody could give a much bigger donation. I don't have anything to give. If I try to give anything, the treasurer here would just really get me in big trouble. So anyway, I went, I was invited, the second VIP, and of course he had to ask them, why? Why did you invite me? And then they told me it's because at that time, I don't know, about 30 years at that time, going every year to support them, and they really valued what I taught there. But I also valued, thank you, for respecting what you've taught. And I also took the opportunity by asking the bodyguards of Colin Barnett, he was a state premier, he had bodyguards, is it okay if I bless him with the holy water? And I think they realized it wasn't dangerous for him, it would be fun to watch. So I gave even the Premier, Colin Barnett, a dousing with holy water, and he couldn't do anything. I enjoyed that I think you know me by now, I would enjoy that. And so anyway, I doused him. But also, just why? Why did they invite me there? And it was because what I was teaching was straight down the line Buddhism, and it worked for human public health. And because of that, sometimes I wonder, why do people want to kind of change or adapt Buddhism to make it a stronger, better service for humanity? And in all these years, honestly, I can't really feel you need to. Sometimes when you don't kind of make claims, you just cite evidence. Yes, this does work. You teach them meditation, you teach people how to be good, to have sila. Sila is virtue. You teach people like simple things, like how to bow to a Buddha statue. You've heard me say this before. Why? Why do Buddhists bow to a Buddha statue? What's that got to do with goodness in our world? That's so last century or centuries before. It's just taking some cultural additions to Buddhism. No. I won't tell the full story because I keep on telling this every other week. The weeks I don't tell it, someone else gives a talk here. I like telling this story because it's a great example of why we do these things. Why do Buddhists bow? I used to say it's so we can exercise our tummy muscles so you don't get fat. But then people look at me and say, well, it didn't work for you, did it? I said, no. It's more than that. It's when I bow, what does it mean to bow? It's not just a ceremony. You bow, and the first bow is always to try and remember the power of virtue, of goodness. Goodness in this world is treating everybody with respect. That's virtuous. not just because that somebody looks different than you, or from a different race, or from a different gender, or whatever gender identification people want to be. I think you all know that in my years as a monk, I really try to support wherever I can LGBTQIA+, because they're discriminated against. You want to make sure that they too have a life where they feel respected and feel free. And anybody, no matter what gender you are, what race you are, even like people who get discriminated for no good reason, that's impossible. It shouldn't happen. And I'm not just going to say, okay, yeah, it shouldn't happen. You want to do something about it if it's at all possible. And that's kind of like a life work, like a life mission, to get some fairness and equity in our world. It doesn't matter what country you come from. Now you're in Australia, in Perth, you're supported. I hope you feel that way. And so you try your very best to take away impossible pain. That's part of virtue. To be good, to respect others, to learn from others. And I still always love learning from others. That's one of the reasons why, in all my life as a monk over here in Perth, I've deliberately gone out of my way to try and contact people from other religions. And I've even had them coming here to give talks during the Rains retreat. So you can actually learn, what do rabbis think, what do Muslims think, what do Christians, I don't know who else we've invited here. I think we've invited pretty much everybody, haven't we? So at least if you don't believe me, you can go and sort of listen to their talks. And it's wonderful to be, they're all online. It's wonderful to be able to be that open so you can understand what other people are. You may not agree with them, but at least we can be respectful towards one another. When you give people respect, it's amazing just how they can, how change happens. Even just Venerable Akinchen next to me, he's also one of the monks who actually goes to the prisons to help teach. Not yet? You haven't got your approval yet?
No, maybe next year.
Maybe next year, okay. But those who actually do go volunteer to teach in the prisons, monks volunteer as well. And when we volunteer there, one of the first things you learn is how to respect the person who's right in front of you. That way of Emperor's 3 questions, now is the only time we ever have, it's the most important. The person in front of you is the most important person in the world. You focus on them, they're more important than anything else. And the only thing to do is to care. Not to cure, but to care, to respect. There's no way in the world that I can care for somebody who's in prison and who's done some terrible, terrible crimes. That's what I thought. But when I just care for them, they feel respected. Someone's not trying to interrogate them. Someone's not trying to blame them. Someone's not trying to just change them. Just to care for them. Imagine what that feels like. You're actually cared for. And that's why you got one of those great praises, one of the best I've ever got. And I want each one of you to one day experience what it must be like to be praised like this. And that was when a prison officer called. And he said, I want to speak to Ajahn Brahm, he's busy. No, I want to speak to him. He was quite insistent. So I said, yeah, okay, how can I help? And then he said, I've been in the prison service all my life, he said. And he said also that he's not a Buddhist, he said, but I've noticed something strange. I've noticed that every prisoner who ever went to your classes, every one of them, never comes back after they come out of jail. So there's zero recidivism. And I thought it was really weird. Why? He said, I want you to come back and teach. Don't know what you're doing, I don't care what you're doing, but it's working. Please. And of course, and I said I'll try, but I don't think I did because I had to keep coming here and going overseas and do all sorts of other stuff. But nevertheless, I made sure that other monks, other Buddhists go out to those prisons to teach. Why? What works? Something simple like that. Not trying to cure them, not trying to get anything from those prisons at all. I did tell some of the monks that some of those prisoners over in Karnet, who actually some of them you met, some of them actually were in Karnet prison farm at the time, but they never came to any meditation class. But I thought they would make excellent committee members in the future, especially when I remember that Ajahn Brahm was actually in Karnet when I visited there. I mean, he certainly had lots of money somewhere. I don't know if it was properly gained, but surely he had enough to give a donation, a few 100,000 to the Buddhist Society. Would you have accepted it? That's interesting. Just as an aside, that sometimes it's one of the questions the monks have to face. If somebody made a donation to, say, the nuns' monastery, do you check up where it comes from? Are you supposed to? Well, the Buddha said that even like people who've done bad things in their life deserve an opportunity to make some good karma. There was this nun, fully enlightened, Upalawana. What was it, Upananda? The one who, she had a disciple who was a leader of a gang of thieves. And this is a very interesting example. The leader of the gang of thieves, they stole a cow. And they slaughtered that cow and cooked it. And one of the thieves who was running away saw his teacher, this Arahat Bhikkhuni, meditating quietly. And as she was coming out of her meditation, he sort of tied up a portion of that meat and said, "This is for whatever ascetic wants some." And her teacher heard it. And so she took it, and this was in one part of India, and she flew to another part of India, not on Air Asia, just using her own powers, and offered it to the Buddha. Some other things happened on the way, which meant it became a subject of one of our Vinaya rules. But it was fascinating. Vinaya was our monastic discipline. It was amazing that this and other stories showed that the Buddha said that if it's offered by even a thief, you should take it as a monk, as a nun, as a monastic, because giving the opportunity for someone to make some good karma. If you really feel it's appropriate, you can always give it back to the original owner afterwards, but you should always accept it. So I thought, what if Ajahn Brahm wanted to make a donation? Should I accept it? At least I think it'd be wonderful if people had such a good heart they could do something like that. One of the most serious, frightening of criminals, you may say, was one I met, not here in Australia, but I met him in Broadmoor jail over in the UK. Broadmoor is the prison for the criminally insane. And that was Ronnie Cray, the Cray brothers. And he was the one who was on medication while he was in this jail. But nevertheless, when I met him, and just apparently he was really interested in Buddhism at that particular stage of his life, And he said, just as I left, he shook my hand and said, if ever I get a few quid, I will send some to your monastery. Of course, he never got that few quid, but I really appreciated that gesture which he had, and he wanted to support someone who was a kind person. You know Ronnie Cray? I think they made a movie about him and his brother afterwards. Really, really violent people. Were they? Or there's a person who did violent crimes in the past? I kind of like that idea of giving people chances and not just judging them. Okay, they're in jail for these violent crimes, but giving them the opportunity to be kind, to be good, to be caring. Maybe a weakness of mine, but I always feel that's a beautiful thing to share with people. But anyhow, that's one of the first things which I bow to, virtue. Second thing I bow to is peace. Third thing is compassion. Virtue, peace and compassion. I've told that story before, and that's what I actually do. I don't just make this up. And because I do that, you find so many other people find it really easy actually to do bowing. I love it. Because every time you bow, you remember the power, the beauty of being a virtuous person, someone you can trust. That's also something. For 50 years, I've been a monk, 42 years serving here, and being able to someone you can trust. And sometimes these little kids, just one of them, I asked him how old was he when I first came. He used to come to the Dhamma school, and they think he was 2. That's what his mum said. He said, I must have been about 2 at the time. He's now 50. No, it can't be that. He must be 8 at the time. He's now 50. He had his 50th birthday. And he's a specialist doctor. You've known him all your life and helped him out many, many, many times. And he helps us out as well. So there's that trust there, that virtuous behavior which is seen by me, and the virtuous behavior which has impressed him. Again, because I don't plan these talks, one of those experiences, for example, our local hardware store is not open anymore now because of Bunnings and other stuff have just become taken over. This was called Armadale Hardware. And I just remember there's the owner of the Armadale Hardware, it was Ron. And because I was building Bodhinyana Monastery, really was building. My name's on the building license of the main hall. And I did most of that work. And a lot of times you have to go to the shop to get this and get that. And every time I went to Armadale Hardware, they knew me so well, said, oh, you can go in the back. And I could choose exactly what I wanted. And sometimes I knew where all these parts were better than they did. I'm being honest. And so I'd bring them back and just put them on our bill. And then one day, just doing something simple like getting some, I think, Laminex, and they had to choose the colour. They gave me the brochure. The whole shop was full of plumbers and bricklayers and all these other big tradies, and they were big guys. In those days, I was actually thin. And so they were all queuing up and looking for a place I could open the brochure up to choose the colour. Then I should have been more mindful. I put it down on an empty area. It happened to be the cash register. And as I put it down, I must have pressed one of the buttons. I didn't realise what I was doing. I was just trying to find some space to choose the colour. And there's so many builders in the shop, and the till opened right in front of me. All the day's takings. I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of dollars was in there. And as soon as I did that, the till goes ding, and then everybody in the shop went quiet. It really did look like Ajahn Brahm was robbing the shop. And all the builders stopped as well, and one of them said to Ron, the owner, "You better look at that guy." You know what the owner did? He said, "Oh, that's one of the Buddhist monks. They can't even touch the stuff. They can't even touch money." And he just walked out and left me with the day's takings right in front of me. And of course he never took anything. That's how much he trusted us. And I do remember that he would actually come to our monastery. He wasn't a Buddhist. Every time he had a delivery to be done, there was like a deli next door, a little cafe. He'd always actually get some food, anything, for a few dollars, what you got there, and just put it on the truck and take it down and offer it to us. That's how actually kind he was. He really got into it after a while. But what I really loved was how he appreciated the honesty. He didn't have to have a security camera on us. He didn't have to take our fingerprints. He just knew we kind of didn't touch it. And I loved that attitude, that people can trust you. The same with all our committee members who are here, all our volunteers, everyone. That's the most important thing to do, to have it. That precept's enough that you can trust everybody. That makes life so simple. And number two, somebody says they're going to do something. How many people can you actually trust and depend on? Even things, when I say that I'm going to be here at 4 p.m. this afternoon for you, did you ever doubt that I wouldn't be able to arrive? Of course not. If I say that I'm going to be there, if I can't get there, I will just make sure I email you, ring you, do something to make sure that you know that I'm not going to let you down. I should actually have an airline called Ajahn Brahm Airlines. It would always leave on time. It always arrive on time instead of being late and being caring for everybody. Oh no. I thought that was some of the swimmers this afternoon. Actually, where they've gone? Ronnie and our treasurer? Oh, she's next door. Oh, okay. And I think your son is helping organise the WA swimming event over the last few weeks, is that correct? Where's Ronnie gone? Our treasurer. Not our treasurer. Okay. I should really tell you this. Is that true? The WA swimming event? No, it's not. I thought it was your son was helping organise that. Oh, there is a swimming event on. State championships. Oh, lifeguarding. Okay, this is another. That's a relief, because one of my Thai disciples, he actually offered a katina robe a couple of years ago. He's brought many of his swimmers over from Bangkok International School. They're competing. And I thought, oh my goodness, if they're competing against your children, I'm in big trouble for giving them lots of string and blessings this afternoon. And I did that. But anyhow, I sometimes get into trouble with that. Somebody wants a blessing, they're having some big event or something, and I bless them all. And then they're from another country, like the Sri Lankans. That Sri Lankan cricket team, many years ago, we beat Australia in the final, and they had my holy string on their wrists. I did keep it quiet for many years, because if the Australian cricket team find out, I would be in really big trouble. The reason why they lost the World Cup one day tournament was because of one of their Buddhist monks who just supported the other team. But anyhow, where was I? Oh yeah, virtue and peace. And it's nice to actually to have people from different nations coming together and just without any discrimination. Look, one of the reasons I learned how to be colorblind is because where I went to school was just a very poor school. I thought this was normal. There were people from so many different races in the school I went to. And also, one of the other people who went to that school, I keep telling you, was this fellow, he became an actor, Alan Rickman. That was Professor Snape in Harry Potter series. He went to the same school as I did. Honestly. But nevertheless, he was, I think his father died when he was young or something, so he was very, very poor. So same as my family were poor, so we went to that. It was just a local school. But nevertheless, at that local school you saw so many people from poor homes, A lot of people, I remember this guy, Jersey Sahaki, amazing I can remember him. We used to play football together. I was the right wing, he was the right half. So, we knew each other really well. Polish. And many other people from so many different countries were best friends. I didn't matter who they were. If they played good soccer, they were on my team. So we had this sort of kind of living together, playing together, getting into trouble together. We had this wonderful sense of being friends. And I never lost that. I don't care where you're from. If you're kind, you're one of my mates. And that's kind of like the compassion which you have for all beings. And that kindness and compassion and virtue and peace is actually what I bow to. Is that culturally inappropriate in Australia? Every time I do that, it's so culturally unifying that that time I did go and teach over at Christchurch Grammar School, and a few days later the principal of Christchurch Grammar, who was a very devout Christian, if I had told people what he did, he might have got the sack for that, because he came to Bodhinyana Monastery. I took him inside the hall and we bowed together, side by side, to the Buddha. We bowed to virtue, peace and compassion. That's such an easy thing to do. This is one of the reasons why. Is this secular Buddhism? This is actually Buddhist Buddhism, understanding it properly. And even things like, sometimes people think that secular Buddhism is where you abandon such teachings like rebirth. You don't need rebirth. People say rebirth is unscientific. I don't know who they say it's unscientific. That's one of the reasons why I love I keep on mentioning his name, my mate, he really was a mate, he still is a mate, still alive, hasn't got reincarnated yet, which is Professor Bernard Carr. And he was a close associate of Stephen Hawking's. You can't get more scientific than that. And he was a mate because we did theoretical physics together. I remember he was a couple of years ahead of me, but it's still going to his Stephen Hawking's lecturer, Professor Sharma. I still remember him. He was teaching me astrophysics of the galaxy. Really cool subject. The trouble was the astrophysics of the galaxy was just so inspiring, I just couldn't take any notes. I was just dumbfounded by what I was listening to. But anyway, that was the area. I am scientific. And it's for certainly know things like rebirth. Why do you say that rebirth is not some cultural addition? There's far too much proof and evidence that any rational individual would actually admit that the evidence is just demanding the fact that reincarnation, rebirth actually exists. You have lived before. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it is. But even if you can prove that just one person lived before, it'd be really weird that they lived before and no one else did. And there's enough people who know their past lives, and they check them out. And there's no way they could get their evidence by any other way. And that's even people like Stephen Hawking, not Stephen Hawking, sorry, Bernard Carr, my mate. And that's why, as well as being theoretical physicists together, and both Buddhists, he was also ghost hunting companions. We'd go to houses which were reputed to be haunted with all the equipment and check out, is there anything to this at all? How can you have ghosts without rebirth? There's lovely stories. Do you want to hear a little ghost story? This was one of our members here. he was Scottish, Scot, and he could always knew how to fly an aircraft. Even when he was a boy, growing up, never had any sort of training, not in this life anyway, but you put him in front of the controls of an aircraft and he could know how to fly it. So that's when he went to one of our members who did his hypnotic regressions to find out why. And he took him into this hypnotic regression and he could recall in some other time during the Second World War, flying from, I think, South Wales over to Gibraltar. And he said the name of the aircraft. And it wasn't attacked. It was like a new aircraft had a faulty rudder control system. And he crashed in Gibraltar. And he recalled that, in his past life regression. He said that's why he could fly aircraft even in this life, because he'd learnt in the past. And when it was sent to me, because the person who did it, past life regressions, is a very close member of our Buddhist society, I won't say who, but nevertheless, he sent it to me, and it was on a Saturday. I finished the meditation class, and I was in my room, had an hour or two to spare, so I got on the computer and checked. And I'm not really good on the computers, but I had enough initiative to check Gibraltar air crashes, Second World War. And there was just a whole article about what happened. And I had the recording from this past life regressionist, and it was pretty accurate. So accurate, I thought, wow, this guy actually was that person. They didn't have that many sort of crashes in Gibraltar. Didn't have many sort of fights in that area. Most of the action in the Second World War was maybe over France or Italy. But nevertheless, just you can prove one. Why not everybody? It'd be really weird if some people get reborn and other people don't. It makes a lot of sense. I remember this other guy who got sort of, I keep remembering, Roy Hudd his name was. ROYHUDD. And he was like a comedian, which I used to see, had TV shows when I was growing up. And he remembered his past life by accident. He got, the British government in London had a new one-way system. And he got lost the first day. And he went down a street he never been to before in this life. If you want to check him out, ROYHUDD. And I think he's still alive. Must be really old now though. But anyway, went down the street, he recognized it so easily. And on one of those houses was one of these little blue plaques. Famous people who lived there before. And the person who lived there before was called Dan Leno, DANLENO, who was probably the most famous music hall entertainer of his generation. He died maybe before the Second World War anyway. And so this Roy Hudd, that was me. He remembered who he was before. And so he knocked on the door of the house. And because he was a TV personality in this life, this Roy Hudd, they let him in. And he said, I used to live here before. I said, no way, we've been living here since the Second World War. Yeah, it's before then. He said, I was Dan Leno. And he took the owners around their house. And he knew all of what was there before. And just and you could actually see. He said, this used to be the window. This used to be where I did my rehearsals. And he actually published that article. I remember reading that article years and years ago. He got the sack because of that article. The person who was in control of, I don't know if it was the BBC or the ITV, the two channels in UK at the time. He said, I'm a very staunch Catholic, I don't believe in reincarnation, so you're sacked. True story. That was the end of his, basically, career, except he became an authority writing books about Dan Leno. So anyway, there's lots of information there. This is not some cultural addition from the past. This is actually what you can even prove right now with a person who has a scientific mind which must always be open and just be out there open to criticism. So you say what you believe, okay, tell me why you don't agree with that. That's one of the things about Buddhism which we've had ever since the very beginning. Please, to be open for questioning. And once one has that, it's not a cultural addition. One of the other things with the idea of being secular is because there's some authority, some religious authority which tells you what to do. And of course we do have things like popes and archbishops of Canterbury and stuff, but how many times have I told you what to do? I'm a senior monk now. Have I ever told you not to argue with me? It'd be nice if I could. Well, I told the monks, monks don't argue with me. I'm the abbot here. Over in Thailand, you can do that. In Thailand, you have the authority. If you're the abbot, you can ask any of the monks to go, to leave the monastery. And they have to. If they don't, you can actually call the police, and the police actually escort them outside the monastery. I don't have that power over here. So unfair. Even in the Catholic monasteries, over Abbot Placid used to tell me, because he's the boss, he can order any of his monks to leave. And they have to. You've got no recourse. You're the abbot. That's the boss. And it's nice you don't have that type of power, because if you did, that would be so corrupting. So you allow everybody to question you. That is the original teachings of the Buddha. That's even why you did unconventional thing like giving opportunity for ordination for bhikkhunis. Now if we were, that's not secular Buddhism, that's actually part of Buddhism. That's what the Buddha said. The Buddha ordained bhikkhunis. I'm not doing anything the Buddha never did. That was his mission for his life, to make sure there's equity for males, females, and there was no sort of sectarianism. Didn't matter sort of who your father was or what lineage you were. If you were a good person, that made you a good person to ordain. And that was something which was quite revolutionary, and actually you can't improve on that as far as I can see. So Buddhism was even more secular than secular. You don't have to change it. So these days, that's one of the reasons I love going to conferences, when someone can start to challenge you, and they challenge you. That's actually one of the reasons why we started the full ordination for bhikkhunis. At one of these conferences, I remember over in Singapore, there was one of these nuns, Venerable Yifa, one of the Fo Kwang Shan nuns. Do you remember her? Because we invited her to a conference over here. The monks used to call her Yiha. She was very, very feisty. And I thank her for that. Because I remember when people asked me, Ajahn Brahm, what do you think about the ordination of bhikkhunis? And I thought, well, it's a bit difficult. But yeah, why not? We'll do some more investigation. And she got on the microphone and said, Ajahn Brahm, that is so patronizing. You should be ashamed. And I said, actually, I agree with you. She told me off. And that was one of the reasons why I thought, I can't just take an easy line here, a simple line. You've got to actually do it. That was Sister Yifa. Good on her. So that's one of the reasons why the idea of like monastic or religious hierarchy or patriarchy, or you have to do it their way, you can't do it any other way. Many, many times over here at our committee meetings we made decisions to do things a different way. How many rebellious things have we done here over the years? We've done quite a few. We can still do more. We ain't finished yet. But if it's something which is reasonable, rational, logical, something which is going to help Buddhism become stronger and people become stronger, just things like teaching just people how to, what's that? Come back again to that assets thing. That teaching people, instead of letting go of the past or trying to get rid of it, to actually encompass it, be kind to it, opening the door of your heart, to whatever's happened to you in the past. Really bring it in. And that really stunned me, just how powerful that can be. You're not trying to hide anything. You're trying to be kind to it. Getting rid of something or being kind, which is most important. Those of you as nurses, those of you as doctors, those of you who are even veterinary doctors, your whole purpose is to be kind, not to cure. Same as me. I've got so many monks, I'm not trying to cure them all. Am I? Thank you. You try and care for them. And then the cure actually happens when you're caring. And about, do you really, 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 really want, to be the top scholar in Oxford? I said, that really just is not the way to go. Instead of being the top scholar, being the kindest, the most caring. That's where you learn the most. I don't know about you, but sometimes you actually see people who are the top of their trade. Like one of those physicists which I saw here in Perth, that because I still had lots of connections, that I was invited to see Roger Penrose. He's now a Sir, he's got a Nobel Prize now. But at the time he didn't have a Nobel. But he's a brilliant mathematician, theoretical physicist. He's the one who got the theory for the black holes. Yep. It was Professor Hawkins adapted that to get like Big Bang theory for the universe. But the black hole theory, that was Roger Penrose. And he came to Perth to give a lecture, and he was also going to present at the Gin Gravity Centre, Professor Blur's place. And because I was a good friend of Professor Blur, I got this invitation to have dinner with Professor Roger Penrose. But the invitation says Ajahn Brahm and partner. And then I needed somebody to drive me up there. I can't walk, it's a long way. I'm into Gingin. And so I got Dennis to go with me. And Dennis was our former president, and he jumped at the idea of going to meet this famous scientist. And so we went together there. And of course, honestly, you can ask Dennis, I never had any dinner. I didn't go there for the food. I went there to check out this guy. And he was the sort of person, he was brilliant in front of a blackboard, but he was a wallflower. He was somebody you couldn't have a conversation with. He was somebody, when I looked at him and tried to sort of connect with him, someone who I did not want to be. I'd much rather to be a monk than to be a Nobel laureate. So, It's much better to be a nun than a Nobel laureate in whatever you do at Oxford. And I mean that. So that's one of the reasons why, where am I going with this? With the idea of what Buddhism is, secular Buddhism. This idea of secular taking away religious authority, there's been no religious authority there to begin with. It's always up to each individual. We have like a code of Vinaya discipline, which is pretty basic and pretty common sense to me, avoiding any problems or difficulties. It's nothing you need to throw away. And things like rebirth or law of karma. Law of karma, you don't need to be afraid of the law of karma. When you get wise and compassionate, you know how to forgive. The law of karma is not a punishment system. Even I know that some people think, oh, when you die, you're going to have to face up to all those bad things which you've done in the past. You're going to be judged, and if you've been really bad, you'll be sent to hell. No way. Oh, okay, I know I'm going over time. Can I finish off with one last story? Oh, yes. Okay. Do you mean finish off or tell one more story? Which one? That was the one about this Christian priest. And on a Sunday at his sermon, he was asked this question by this. He recognized this person, one of his great supporters. He was a professor of religion at the local university, professor of theology. And so he put his hand up and asked, you don't do this at these Christian churches. He asked a question. He said, you just said, if you don't believe in Jesus, you'll go to hell no matter what you're like. Is that true? Now this priest was pretty smart, so he said, there's actually not much time right now, so I'll answer you next week. Which actually translated as he didn't know the right answer. Because he kind of thought, there's all these other wonderful people in this world. Amazing people like, Gandhi, like Nelson Mandela, other great people like the Buddha. Really wonderful people. They didn't believe in Jesus. Does that mean they have to go to hell? Does that sound fair to you? So anyway, the next day, in the Christian religion apparently, on Mondays they have the day off. It's actually weird because I never have a day off, do I? Anyway, on Tuesday he went to his books. He couldn't find a decent answer. So on Wednesday he went to one of his other friends who was a priest. He couldn't give him a good answer. So on a Thursday he went to see the bishop. Not a good answer. He sent to the archbishop. The archbishop didn't have a good answer. And on Saturday he sent to another sort of expert at the university. He thought, surely you must have an answer. And the expert at university did have an answer, but he couldn't understand a word of it. So there was Saturday night. The next morning he would have to face this this professor and one of his big supporters, and he didn't know what to answer. He thought all night, couldn't get any answer. So early in the morning he did what these Christians do. He went to the church early, started praying and fell fast asleep. And while he was asleep, he had a dream. And at the dream, he was at a train station. And he looked at the train and he asked one of the conductors on the platform, he said, this train wouldn't be going to heaven, would it? And the conductor said, yes. And you're a priest, so you can get up there for free. So I got on the train. It's like a dream, okay? Very, very vivid dream. So in a few seconds, he arrived at this other platform and had the big sign on the side, heaven, welcome. And so he got out of the train, and then he went to the first person he saw and said, can I just ask you a question? He said, yes, certainly, welcome. And he said, what's this place called? So this place is called heaven, welcome. He said, how long have you been here? Oh, I've been up here for thousands of years, said this gentleman. Wonderful, he said. You're the sort of person I need to speak with. You've lived up here for such a long time. Do you know most of the people? He said, oh, I know all of the people here. Is there anyone up here called the Buddha? The Buddha? Buddha? Don't know him. Anyone up here called Marcus Aurelius? He wrote some amazing poetry. He was a Roman general, but reasonably quiet, kind person. No, don't know him. What about Mahatma Gandhi, little Indian fellow? Nope. Don't know him. What about Nelson Mandela? Nope. All these wonderful people you hadn't heard of. And so this priest said, I've got my answer. My book is right. To go to heaven, you have to believe in Jesus Christ. Don't sue me now for being a bad Buddhist. There's another part of the story which is coming up soon. The answer. So he went back to the platform. There was another train on that platform. And so he asked the conductor, that train over there would not be going to a place called hell, would it? He said, yeah, actually, it is going there. And he said, can I have a return ticket, please? So he got his return ticket, and in no time at all, he arrived at this platform, and it had his words, H-E-L-L. And he said, oh, great. And this time, when he walked out of the train, he didn't even need to look for somebody. Someone came right up to him, can I carry your bag, sir? Anything I can do for you? Welcome to hell. And had even balloons on the station. And he said, are you sure I'm in the right place here? Is this hell? Yes, it is. Sit down. It must have been a long journey for you. Do you want something to drink? How about some food? What type of food would you like? There's a delicious Thai food, delicious Malaysian food, delicious... What other food is there? And fish and chips if you want. Please excuse me. Vietnamese food, that's nice. And then, how about some Indian food? We've got some nice rice and curry. He said, look, hang on a minute. Yeah, I'm hungry, but in my understanding, hell should be a place of torture and torment. And the person said, oh yes, it used to be like that. Before the Buddha came down here and Nelson Mandela. I think you get the message. It's not the place which makes the people. It was much more happy and kind, a much better place to be. Now that's only like a story. That's not from the suttas. That's actually made up by somebody else, but I thought it was a really good story. And that's why I told it. So you can't just say, what is a hell realm, a heaven realm? It's actually who's there. That makes it a heaven realm or a hell realm. Hope you agree on that and don't excommunicate me. But anyway, excommunication can only be excommunicated once. Is that correct? Oh, come on. Anyway, I've talked too long again. It's 9 o'clock now, so I better shut up. Otherwise you really will excommunicate me. So that's a little bit about secular Buddhism. You don't need secular Buddhism. Buddhism is already sort of works in our modern world. Everybody's included, and that's a huge amount of good work. Thank you. Okay. Now, questions, comments, complaints. Has to be quick. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, I'm timing you. Okay, start.
Ajahn Brahm, this is not a question, okay? But I'd like to make a comment on secular Buddhism, okay? Secular Buddhism is not Buddhism, The secular Buddhists, they are a disgrace to Buddhism, What they do is they pick up bits and pieces, of Buddhism, and try to make it Buddhism. It's just like describing an elephant. They just like a tail, the trunk is to describe the whole thing. It's not that way, you know. Buddhism comes with the whole package, Ajahn Brahm, you know, the whole package. It's got 2,500 over years of rich history, you know, and with the suttas, and it's got a lot of healing energy. Associated with it, the thing, no, okay. So just one more quickly, no.
No, it's 1 minute.
Because no. Sorry. Ajahn Brahm, few years ago there was a talk on circular Buddhism. A year, okay, I went to do a research.
Yeah.
And I went to see this YouTube, you know. What they do with this circular Buddhism, you know, they have a small place, okay, and then they charge people, you know. People they are sick, you know, and they are vulnerable. This thing, they go there and they charge them this thing, you know, and they have and they tell them all this nonsense about just a small part of Buddhism, you know. They have a Buddha statue with candles. I feel like just going there and take out the Buddha statue. You're not portraying Buddhism. Buddhism comes the whole package with a healing energy, you know.
I agree with you.
You know, you don't do this to people. They charge them £200 to £300 an hour or
yeah.
dollars an hour.
It's ridiculous how much.
Yeah.
Okay, there is some questions on the internet. Okay, internet questions coming up. It's like a money-making thing. That's why we always say here, and it is absolutely true, you can always ask for your money back. It's true, isn't it? You don't get it back, but you can always ask. Dear Ajahn, sometimes you ask us to ask our mind, how peaceful am I? Can you please explain a little bit more about that? When you ask your mind, how peaceful are you? It's like asking your leg, you may have a sore knee. Say, how are you? Do you feel better from resting it, to sort of bathing it or whatever? So by asking, it's an inquiry, an exploration. You're finding out what works for you. What is peace? What is happiness? What is kindness? And that way you're getting more insight. It's an insight practice. And when I ask my legs how you feel, if I've got myself in a bad posture, they tell me. Like I ask you, I ask any of you, is your chairs comfortable? Is it too hot, too cold? With tonight's meditation, I focus on accepting moments of frustration and looking at the happiness and joy of the kindy graduates and excitement of the future. I thought of how proud of myself I was, and I became very emotional, crying from happiness. Is this normal? Yes, and it's brilliant. Never deny yourself that praise. You know, you see just when people graduate and they do well, that's called mudita. And mudita is like a free happiness. Instead of people getting jealous or being doubtful and saying, oh, is this allowable? Of course it is. Why is it when people go to a religious place, they think they're not allowed to be happy? Instead you get fire and brimstone. They get all this fighting if you describe what the hell realm is and what's waiting for you and what's going to happen to that boss who's really cruel to you and never treats you properly and gives you such a hard time. And you can start talking about that and people get really excited. But it's not true. Instead we have this beautiful sense of, in Buddhism, this is forgiveness and understanding, learning from the mistakes which people make. And even my understanding of what happens to you when you pass away, even if you've done some terrible bad things, you can still be forgiven. You can let it go. Like those ladies of assets, you know, who've gone through real hell, which, you know, I just don't know how on earth they managed to survive that. You know, torture and rape and beatings for no reason whatsoever. And you look at them and they're like saints. They just have managed to give it meaning, understand it, and they're not in pain anymore. They don't want to give any pain to anybody else. They're not looking for revenge. Revenge just leads to more hurt and more pain. quickly. Dear Ajahn, is it possible that delusion, ego, fights back and it's not possible to go deep in meditation? Sometimes it seems so for me. Yeah, it can fight back, but we've got the means, the power to go around the problem. So what you do is, whatever fights back, you teach them how to meditate, because they like that. And when they're in deep meditation and they're not really aware, then you can actually go around them. There's all these ways and means of defeating Mara. Mara, I know you, and Mara has to depart. Dear Ajahn Brahm, I had a poor childhood. I am grown and away from my abusers, but it continues to haunt me. How can I deal with not having parents? My heart still hurts not having parents. And sometimes there are people whose parents died when they were young, but they still have these people who teach them, guide them, are inspirations for them. We had Father's Day. I think it was a Thai Father's Day a few days ago, December the 5th. That's also Father's Day in Thailand. And sometimes people gave me cards. You adopt a father. Why not? I don't have any biological children, so if you need a father, that's why sometimes they call the monks in Thailand Lung Po. It means respected father. But sometimes it sounds more like Lumpy. Lumpy. And that's not a good name for me because I am a bit lumpy. Make any sense, or am I speaking on too long? Okay? So, if you haven't got a father, adopt one. If I haven't got a mother, adopt one. Now we have many bhikkhunis all over the world. Adopt one as your mum. Respected mum. Does that work? I don't know. You're really quiet. I think you're not encouraging me, so I better shut up. Okay, so thank you all for listening. And now we can pay respects to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and then you could go on your merry ways back home, wherever you need to be.